Hello, everyone. On behalf of NCSL, the Legislative Research Librarians, and the National Legislative Services and Security Association, welcome to our webinar, De-escalation Techniques for the Legislature. A PDF of the presentation is in the Event Resources tab at the top of the screen, and we encourage questions throughout the presentation, which can be typed into the chat box at the bottom left of your screen. We will have 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Dan to take questions. And also, this webinar will be recorded and available on the NCSL Webinar Archive within a few days. And now, I am pleased to welcome our speaker today, Director of Security for the Pennsylvania Senate, Dan Billings.
Okay, thank you, and I want to thank the NCSL for making this possible. I know it's a timely topic for everybody that signed on today. So that's my background right there, and I have spent a good deal of time, as you can see, working on the issue of workplace violence, and some of the experience that goes with that education also came from being in charge of hostage negotiators. And if you think about our topic today, de-escalating people that are upset, that are towards the path of violence, it's really not much different from what a hostage negotiator does, which is get someone to talk to them, find out what the problem is, and then try to solve that problem and reduce the chance that anybody's going to be hurt. One of the other things I did in my prior life was I was in charge of a peer support program in the county that I came from in Pennsylvania, in Berks County, that I then did for the entire state through the Fraternal Order of Police. And that peer support program is really very much similar to what we're talking about today, and that is, again, talking people down, de-escalating them from probably doing some things they were going to regret. So let's get going here and talk about the next thing is, how about our workplace? So how do we enhance our work site, make it safer? And really what all of you probably do now is you have a proper understanding of everybody's job role. So the manager, the supervisor, and the folks that are forward-facing to the public, telling each person, this is our expectation. So make it clear. Make that guideline in writing and clear, and that way we're not leaving it to our frontline folks to say, not really sure what I should do here, so I think I'm going to do this. And then unfortunately, based on whether we're having a good day or a bad day, we might actually do something that is outside of what is expected of us. And then the really important thing about making our workplace safer is getting everyone to report and to document every interaction with a hostile person. Many people don't do that. They talk about it. They think they did it because they say to a coworker, had a really bad interaction here. But then if the person comes back again and again, it's really not helpful to police and to security to say, well, this fellow's been here 5 times before. You have 1 report, and that's today. The other 4 were kind of important because it shows a pattern of behavior. So if we document everything, put it in a written report, and that report goes to the right people, which is management and your security department if you have in-house security, then we have a clear understanding of what we're dealing with as we go forward. And we would recommend this, to take all threats seriously. Sometimes we have folks that work for us that are just so good at diffusing people, they don't think of it as a threat. They don't think of it as a problem. And maybe the next coworker might not be as good as diffusing that person, and it sets that person up for a problem, and then we have no record of that. So we don't want our folks to figure out if this person poses a threat, this person is a threat, this is both. We'd like that to be documented, and then let the people that do this for a living kind of figure that out. And in keeping with good reporting, good training, good rules, is remembering this sort of the golden rule of customer service, which goes a long way to de-escalating violent people. People usually are concerned with the 2 things that you have listed up there on your slide. One is How am I being treated in this interaction? Am I being treated well or not? And then that second thing is, what did they come in here for? They came in to get a problem resolved. So they're looking at both of those things. Did my problem get resolved? And was I treated well? If I was treated well, I have a favorable impression. If I wasn't, and I have to come back again and perhaps again, or I'm one of those folks that, because of what I do, I come back often, we have set up a situation that really makes it difficult to have every interaction go well, because that person's perception really then becomes their reality. So we can do a lot by just being nice to people and have our frontline staff be nice. So we talk about frustration and we talk about aggression. If we're pleasant, we're nice, we're helpful, but we're firm with what it is we have to tell people, especially if it's something they don't like, it goes a long way to getting people out of that frustration mode and into an understanding mode. Because if it goes in the other direction, they go from frustration, which is, as we all kind of figure out, is just an unfulfilled need or desire, and they move into aggression, the potential to move into aggression, I should say. And that's where things could go really bad for us. Because aggression is often that expression of pent-up rage that happens because whatever was going on in their life, especially if it relates to the reason they've stopped by your office in the legislature, we're not sure what that is. So there could be all kinds of things that have already occurred, making it difficult for that person not to be frustrated. And how we treat that person is really going to go a long way to reducing frustration and therefore moving away from aggression. You may hear me say this again, but the pathway to violence goes both ways. Many people are on the pathway to violence at different times in their life, which simply means that if things continue to go negatively, there's a potential they are going to become violent. And a lot of other things go into that statement, but that's really the pathway to violence in general. But it goes both ways. The more we can de-escalate somebody from that frustration mode, the more likely it is that that pathway is going to recede and go in a better direction. So when we talk about people's negative perceptions and positive perceptions, something we want to remember is when people are stressed, their ability to cope really does diminish. You know, picture a person who comes home to their house, their front door has been kicked in, their personal property's been gone through. They call the police, and the police come over. And as a former policeman, I've heard various questions like this in my lifetime. What should I do? I have a door that doesn't close anymore. Meanwhile, they could have everything they need in their house, a block of wood, whatever, nails, hammer, to temporarily fix that. But they need somebody who has not experienced that to simply tell them, hey, this is what you need. So I apologize, that slide changed. So, and when people are in crisis, they have a less of an ability to cope in a rational and calm way. And we came to work that way, hopefully rationally and calm. And we know our job function. The people that work for us know their job function. But the customer may never have been in your office before. They may not know what it is you do. They may not know the process. They may not ever been told the process. So it's really our job to make sure we let the folks know, hey, here, this is how we do what we do. And when someone's really, really stressed, they often need more time to understand, process what we're saying. So to avoid having someone get aggressive, it's our job to slow down what we're saying, not to speak faster and expect that they're going to follow along. Because remember, picture yourself, folks, if you're going to a medical procedure, you've never had that procedure before, and you walk in there, you're kind of anxious, and you have no idea what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to go, where you're supposed to sit, what you're supposed to do with all the items of clothing before you switch into a gown. It goes on and on. Somebody walking us through that and telling us calmly goes a long way to reducing our own stress in that situation. So, what about intuition? The best thing we can tell you is, and this is pretty much anybody who's worked in law enforcement, is you really should listen to your own intuition. If your gut is telling you, hey, I'm really feeling bad about this, and maybe I don't know exactly why I'm feeling bad about this, you should listen to that and get ready to do something about that. So, you know, we tell people walking down the street, if there are people coming towards you that give you a reason to feel afraid, cross the street, do something, change your direction. There's nothing wrong with that. If your gut instinct is signaling that there's danger ahead, that's the time to actually pay attention to what you're seeing and not pretend or hope it wasn't so, if you will. And there's many examples of where people have used this kind of information to do something differently. And in Gavin DeBecker's book, The Gift of Fear, this is a great book. I had my daughters read that when they were going off to college. Mr. DeBecker really nails how important it is to listen to your intuition and then do something about that. Don't ignore it. Focus on it. I explained this story when I spoke to the NCSL here at the Pennsylvania State Capitol. My daughter read that book. She's getting off the SEPTA train. She is walking home to her dorm, and she read all of the wanted bulletins that the police put out, and one suggested that a young man on a bicycle has been robbing students. So she's normally on one side of the street, but there is snow there. So she's walking on the other side of the street where it's not well lit. And she sees this young man go by on a bicycle, and he starts making a big arching circle. So she took her cellular phone out of her pocket and began to dial 911 and made sure that the person on the bike could see the phone in her hand. She knew the police station was nearby, and she assumed that she was going to be robbed. And to her relief, the subject made another circle and just kept going in the other direction, which is her desired effect by what she was doing. And again, that is intuition being put to good use. So again, I would suggest that you focus your attention on that interaction and start honing in on that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, you really want to have your entire being focused on that, just in case something bad's about to happen. Which gets us right into the next thing, and that is enforcing whatever rules, whatever regulations and policies your organization has, but in a manner that respects other people and maintains safety of everybody that's present. So whenever it's practical, and I really stress that word, when it's practical, allow people to tell us what their issue is without interrupting them. And when I say practical, sometimes people are completely out of control right out of the gate. You're certainly not going to want to be, you're going to want to skip this particular step, if you will. But I heard a great presentation by a Penn State Hershey pediatrician to all the security directors in healthcare, and I was privileged to be in the audience. And he said, in our research, the average patient takes 4 minutes to tell their doctor why they came there today. 4 minutes. And their research suggests that the average doctor interrupted that patient after just 2 minutes. So think about that time frame and think about what happens after that. You now have a very upset patient. They are probably already stressed because they had to go to the doctor, and now you've interrupted them before they can finish why they came here to talk to you. And all of the information that hospitals put out, come to our hospital, come to our doctor's practice. We care, we listen. You know, the normal things you'd expect to see in advertising, and then to have that happen, it can inflame the most calm of people. So we would suggest this: listen to the story before you, without interrupting, and really practice active listening. It's something that we have to focus on because with all the distractions that we have in this day and age, we have to actually practice active listening, which means don't think about what we're going to say when they're done. Think about what it is they're saying. We might be able to solve their problem very quickly, or at least give them the steps they need to solve it. And you should notify in-house security or management every time you have a troubling event in your area. And this, believe it or not, folks, doesn't happen as often as you might think. We don't actually have folks calling us up and saying, hey, I probably should have told you this 3 months ago, but we had a really troubling problem, and now that person came back into, say, our district office today. Nobody remembers exactly what was said 3 months ago, and it makes it difficult. But if you notify security, if it's on site, or law enforcement if it's not, of serious things, but management always. The people that are going to make the decisions to keep our workplace safe, it's always going to be management. It's going to be leadership, and we should remember always keep them in the loop because they're the ones that are going to be making decisions that we need made to help people out. So when we deal with upset people, we should really think about starting with the end in mind of that encounter. This person's upset, they're standing in front of us. First question is, what is it we want? How do we want this to end? We want this to end with nobody getting hurt. We want this to end with this person being as satisfied as they can. And then we want this is really for frontline staff, we want to ask ourselves these questions. Is what I'm doing right now legal and within policy and procedure? Is it allowed by our organization and the policies they set forth? So, as an example, if we are required to provide documentation to anyone who asks for it on whatever the question is, and we decide that because this person is being obnoxious, we're not going to do it, and we decide we're simply going to say, I'm not allowed to give you that. One, that's an untrue statement. Two, this person is going to either know instantly or find out rather rapidly that that was an untrue statement. And now you have an angry person who actually does have an axe to grind where maybe they didn't before. And what we also tell people that are in the front line, would you be comfortable explaining what you did to your manager, to your supervisor, to the top people in the organization who may, based on something that happened in the organization, have to explain to the media why we did what we did. And this is a question we've asked people to think about when you think critically. Would you want what you did be on the front page of your local newspaper with your name and maybe your photograph? To help people really think about, I need to follow those really good written policies and procedures that we have in place because they're there for a reason. And even if all of that is met, you've met the policy, you've met the procedure, maybe we would like you to ask yourself, am I doing the right thing under these circumstances? I came from law enforcement, but I also came from healthcare, and we would have people that had limited means, limited resources, extremely difficult to deal with, prior violence, all the things that make for a long day, and we would not be required to give that person a ride home in a cab. But prudence frequently dictated, this person has no money, let's put them in a cab and let that cab take them to a place where they want, within reason, because one, it's a compassionate thing to do, but two, it's a practical thing to do. They're no longer in our organization's way. They're no longer putting people at risk. Just something to think about when we're talking about dealing with upset people. Which goes right into this. Hopefully our mothers and fathers told us this when we were younger. Treat everybody the golden rule, but also treat everybody as if you would like to be treated if the role was reversed. if you're that patient again in that healthcare setting who's about to have a procedure that's kind of iffy and scary and whatnot, you'd want to be treated well. You'd want to know everything that was going to happen. So every time somebody walks into one of our offices, we really should see that person as a customer who needs to be helped, and we should think of that as I need to be approachable, accessible. Sometimes that means getting up from a desk if that's how the office is laid out and walking up to the counter. I know in my younger days when I was in charge of police communications in my police department, I would just sit and observe, and then I said, here's the new rule. Somebody walks through the front door, there's 2 sets of front doors. By the time they go through the second set of front doors, if you're not on the phone or on the radio with the police out on the street, you should already be standing at the counter asking that person how you can help them. And not only asking people how you can help them, but our body language. Every person who's lived long enough on this earth can read body language. It doesn't take any special skill to do that. And quite frankly, if you're a parent, you already know you can read body language because you're always seeing it in your own children. But that body language conveys much, much more than words. And we've all seen the statistics. Perhaps 7% of all communication is verbal, and the more you know somebody, especially at work or at home, you can say, well, boy, isn't that the truth? So we'd like folks to take time to explain what we're doing for them and why we're doing it. It takes an extra 10, 15 seconds, but it keeps that person from guessing what you're doing. It keeps that person from thinking you're ignoring them and you're just wasting time. That's important. And then allowing people to voice their concern. Everybody wants that. We want that when we go somewhere. The people in our office want that too. And remember, at the end of the day, we're not only just trying to help people, we're also trying to keep them from really acting out. So with elements of effective communication, these are kind of easy to remember. They're easy to practice. They're not always easy to do. So when we say you should accurately attend to what's going on, I would ask you to put yourself for just a moment in a funeral home where perhaps you have to pick out a casket for a loved one. And you would expect that funeral director, if it's not somebody you knew extremely well, to accurately be in the moment with you, giving you their full attention. They should accurately be restating what it is you want to have happen with your loved one. And they should be reflecting how you feel. So if you are somber, you would expect a somber person talking to you respectfully and somber. And then as we talk about everybody else, when someone comes into our office and they're upset, we still want to accurately be attending to that one person, give them your undivided attention, restate what you're hearing from that person, reflect the seriousness of how they are behaving by giving them not your undivided attention only, but also be polite, be respectful. And if they start really digressing and going on and on about perhaps, I was over on the Senate side of your Capitol, and now I'm over here on the House side of your Capitol, and I want someone to take care of my problem. I've been doing this for 10 years. At that point, we really want them in the here and the now. And the here and the now is, what brought you in here today? What can I do for you today? And the best way we do that, we use a lot of I statements. I can see you're upset. I can hear that you're upset. I get a sense that you're feeling like you're not getting what you want. People love to hear, if not just their own name, that we actually are taking the time to care about them, and I statements help us do that. When we have to respond to people that are being confrontational, disorderly, etc., first thing we need to do is recognize this is distasteful. Nobody goes to work thinking, what would be great today? Instead of having a normal day at the office, I'd really like somebody to come in here and verbally tango with me, because we don't. And our natural reaction in a work setting is fight, flight, or freeze when we're faced with someone who's really being inappropriate. Our body is starting to do things, and it's starting to get us ready to either fight, which is not our job, run away, which can be counterproductive, or just freeze and hope the person gets tired of screaming at us. As adrenaline starts to course through your body, and there's another great drug called noradrenaline, and that is a similar help to the body. I would just say this: if it's possible, try cycle breathing, like a 4 count. Hold it for 2. Believe it or not, that can actually de-stress you rather quickly. If that person who is really being inappropriate is kind of playing to who's ever in your waiting room, who's ever present, and you could get them to a location away from that stimuli, but not a location where you are stuck there, just you and that person. Someplace where your peers can monitor you and make sure you're okay and make those important phone calls if things turned badly, that would be helpful. And with all people that are getting angry on the pathway to violence, the faster we attempt to diffuse that situation, generally speaking, the better it goes. I'm not talking about the fellow who's barricaded himself, in a part of the building. That's the police, and their motto is going to be the opposite. Time is our friend. For you and I, we want to intercept that early and try to be helpful by being sincere and accurate in what we're saying. Never be personal with somebody who's upset. Even if they're being personal with us, even if they're saying mean and nasty things, we don't want to do that. You really need to monitor your body language at this point. We would like you to project that you are confident, and understand that sometimes people give you a predatory stare because it invokes fear in most people. If it doesn't invoke fear in you, then that attempt has failed, and there's still no violence. So your look, your stance, your tone of voice, it's the key to avoid being a victim. Eye contact is important. Staring is not good, but eye contact is important. You return that stare with calm confidence, and it tends to undermine aggressive behavior. Just remember, as people escalate, as they start going up, their judgment starts going down. So when all possible, let's try to de-escalate and not escalate with our behavior. And anger, frequently, it's the result of a person who's feeling that they've been wronged. And they could feel they're wronged by our organization, some other organization, our particular office, or even somebody else's particular office. We have found here, and I imagine you folks have also found this in your organizations, people that have an axe to grind that does not seem to be grounded in rational thought usually don't just visit one representative's office, one elected official's office. They actually visit quite a few. And that's something that we want to be aware of. This person could have had a really negative interaction at a state senator's office, and now they're at a state representative's office, and they're still projecting the anger they feel at the staff of the other person. So, best thing you can do, don't argue, don't lose your cool, don't make aggressive gestures, listen without judgment, and most people really, really just want to be heard. Even if you can't solve their problem, they want to be heard. You want to let that person save face when they walk out of there. They want to feel as though, if not empowered, at least listened to. Kind of important. So, of course, this is common sense. Actions we'd like everyone to avoid. Don't be sarcastic. I'm talking about frontline staff using this kind of stuff, or you call security and somebody's raising their voice as a sort of threat to gain compliance. Hopefully, all security staff is trained that is something we avoid at all costs. And the last one, with confusing or deceiving a person with mental illness. This is not a course on mental illness, but I think we could all agree mental illness does not equal lack of intellect. It simply is a medical problem. and we should respect that somebody has that medical problem. So moving on to predicting violence, there's a lot of pre-incident indicators that we see, and if we really kind of hone in on that, we can kind of figure it out. And I'll give you a very quick story. So when I was a police officer, I worked in criminal investigation, so we had constant car break-ins. So we would put detectives out at night and think about who breaks into cars at 1 o'clock in the morning on a hot day. So it's very simple. You just look at cars go by, and here comes a car, 4 young people in the car. The windows are down. There's no radio on. They're driving under the speed limit. And the 2 young people in the back are leaning forward, and they're talking to the 2 young people in the front, but you don't hear yelling, laughing, or anything else. They were, in fact, the people that were breaking into cars. And it was very easy for us and law enforcement to pick up on that, because everything that we ever think about with young folks was not present, which made us think, then what is present? And boom, here we are. So with humans, everybody's capable of violence under the right set of circumstances. You can ask a question in any group, who here would, take a human life, and hopefully you're going to see very few hands go up. And then you say, who here would take a human life if that person was trying to harm your child? And every hand goes up. It's the same with everything. Anybody's capable of violence if you put them in the right set of circumstances. Good luck for us. We create the setting because it's our setting. And therefore, we can also influence not just the setting, but the circumstances as well. Give me 1 second here, folks. We're having just a little bit of a problem here. So when all attempts at customer service have failed, and it's kind of clear that they have failed, we want to actually think about this. It's time to disengage. It's time to call for help. When possible, we want you to physically back away from the situation. Hopefully there's a barrier. That barrier is a counter. That barrier is your desk. We want to physically back away from that. Hopefully you and your coworkers have already figured this out based on what's been unfolding in your office. Somebody should be prepared to call either security or the police. They should have been monitoring that situation. So we want you to direct that person to leave. And again, polite but direct. You're going to have to leave here. We can't allow this to happen. If security is on site, we call them. If not, we call the police to remove a person who refuses to go. And we always want you to notify your immediate supervisor anytime there's something like this happens. But here's a really important thing I want to make you think about here. So if you're going to call 911 or security in-house, you need to tell them what's going on. You want the police to come here. But here's the disconnect that we frequently have to sidestep. Here's who's involved in that phone call. You called, the dispatcher who took the call, and then the police or security person who responded. You know what happened from your perspective. The dispatcher's trying to figure out what you're saying from their perspective. Now they're telling the officer that responds, this is what I think you have, and this is what you're walking into. So we should remember the security and the police, they're not going to know exactly why they're there. They'll get the gist. You'll need to explain to them why you called, and then you'll need to explain what you want. So if it's in our offices and we're in state government, it's kind of important that your immediate supervisor, your director, administrator be involved. If we need to have that person removed, we need to make sure we're doing that properly. We need to make sure we're doing that legally. And we need management's input if property has been damaged, because not always our authority to make those calls. So we want our supervisor doing that for us. So if it's active destruction of property, this is actually, unfortunately, I'll have to use the word easier to figure out. Get everybody out of there to a position of safety, to a shelter in place, flee the location, call the police from a portable phone, meaning as we would call it, a cell phone. A cell phone goes with you. You can tell the police what you're seeing. If it's safe, stay online with the police. That way, if the person, you see them get into a motor vehicle or run off the property, you can tell that dispatcher, hey, this person has left. They're now in a green Honda, and that will help the police. We would really say, don't try to stop a person if they're destroying property. Property can be replaced. People, not as much, obviously. You can't replace a human life. You can just replace an employee. So we don't want to have to even think about that. So when it's active violence against people, again, think about where you would go and how you can defend that area, as in we can put things against a door, keep people on the other side of it until the police show up. And again, the more information you give to the 911 dispatcher, the better off you're going to be. So I'm going to just tell you just an inspiring little tidbit that occurred in York, Pennsylvania on February 2nd, 2001. The principal of a school, her name is Norina Bensler. Norina Bensler saw a man walk into her school, and he looked as if he was confused. So she and two teachers walked up to this man and said, "Can I help you?" And this man pulled out a machete quite unexpectedly and started attacking all three teachers. And then and she was seriously injured, and then turned his back on her and headed down to where the classrooms were. And this injured principal, not very tall, jumped on this much bigger man and got him to the ground and held him to the ground with the assistance of two other teachers until the police got in the building and were able to take this person into custody. It's one of those things where we say, if you can get away, get away. If you can hide, hide. If you have to fight back, you have to make that decision. People naturally use their hands anyway to fend off things that are coming at them. This woman is just a living testament to her desire to keep those children safe, and adrenaline paid its role in that particular situation. So adrenaline and how it aids us in time of physical danger, it's really kind of interesting. Provides sometimes better visual acuity. You can see what's going on. It has provided people in the past with superhuman strength. It has provided people with speed. And coupled with a will to survive, it's a formidable weapon against an attack. And again, as the federal government says, and we believe in the run, hide, fight that they talk about, it is best to not be there, get away, get behind cover, but if you have to fight, then fight. And really, through all of this, I can't stress enough, most people just want you to listen to them, hear them out, let them vent their frustration. To them, you are the organization at that moment. So there's a lot better ways to get someone to calm down than saying those dreaded words, calm down, because it generally has, the opposite effect of calming them down. So if we model calm speech, if we model calm actions, it can go a long way to helping that person calm down and speak the way we're speaking. So with anger itself, reactive anger is when a person decides that they'd really like to bop our coworker Bob in the nose for some reason, and we kind of get in the way. We kind of intervene, and now, we might get bopped in the nose. But reactive violence tends to be short-lived because people who are screaming and yelling usually run out of their oxygen supply in about 2 minutes. We just have to remember that in the workplace. Yes, it is disconcerting that somebody's in our office screaming and yelling. But if we interrupt that, it can go from screaming and yelling to something else. Rather, let them kind of run out of gas, if you will, and continue to use those I messages as if you didn't just hear that. I can see clearly you're upset. Now, how can we help you? And there are two types of general violence. Affective, reactive violence, folks, that tends to be someone who has been made to be incredibly angry by whatever's going on in their life. It's intense. It feels like a reaction to a threat. The government did this to me and I feel threatened. It tends to have a limited time frame as it goes along, and it can easily be displaced on another person. So again, you want to bop Bob in the nose because he's the cause of your issues, and I step in front of you or in front of Bob and I get bopped on the nose. Predatory and instrumental violence is a different kind of violence, and it's a very scary violence. Think about a contract killer on a TV movie. There's no emotion in that. It's a controlled and calculated determination to use violence. There's no limited time frame. Whenever the best time to do whatever I'm going to do is when I'll do it. It's usually not displaced on other people unless they become an obstacle. What you and I generally see year in and year out with upset people is people that are affective or reactive to something, and they're easier to de-escalate, not always possible, but easier. Predatory, this is a person who has really decided that they are angry with a particular person and they intend to do something about it. That takes intervention frequently by law enforcement. And I'll take this moment to say this. If you don't know who your law enforcement responders are, you should get to know them rapidly. You should invite them over. You should have frequent meetings with them. Here at Pennsylvania State Capitol, we meet with the Capitol Police every month and the House of Representatives Security every month. We trade information on concerns, and I like to call them security concerns, people that are posing a problem for our folks here or in a district office, so that everybody is on the same page. The one thing you and I can control at our office is the setting. If you really want to avoid violence, the workplace needs to recognize warning signs and mediate the effect of stress on an at-risk person. And right now I'm really talking about a person who works with us, a coworker, an employee who now seems to be really upset. We can't control their personality. We can't control what stressors are happening outside of work. We can control the setting, the workplace, by making it as good a place to work as we possibly can, and I don't just mean aesthetics, but also by getting that person prompt and effective help. So we had a young man who was just very, very popular, and suddenly, in a short period of time, his entire coworker staff became alarmed because he proclamated this. He said, "I'm going to start carrying a gun to work because I was robbed on the street." So they were fearful of this man, and he was really not doing well emotionally. So we had a meeting. I read all the reports. We had him come into the meeting. He stopped as soon as he saw me, and he said, you got to tell me if I'm fired. He just kept repeating, "You have to tell me if I'm fired. I see Mr. Billings is here. Tell me if I'm fired." And I took the lead on that, and I said, "You are not fired, but you could be. So why don't you come over here, and let's see what we can do about this." I'm very happy to say, great employee assistance program. He was put through that program and still working there today, back to being the guy that everybody looks up to and respects. He just needed to get some intervention and realize it's not a smart thing to talk about guns in the workplace. So God forbid we have an event. We should be tending to any injured person. That really takes precedence once it is over. We should account for all staff and visitors. So if we started with 10 people in the room, do we still have 10 people in the room? If not, let's find out if they're okay. Contact your manager or your administrator. These are the decision makers on what we're going to do next. If you have in-house security, of course, they should already have been contacted. Police, if it's a significant issue. And then human resources, however it's described in your organization, they need to be involved in case we need to provide follow-up care to folks that have experienced a bad situation. So common sense preparation, this is going to be easy for professionals like you. Our biggest barrier is just disbelief that you just can't believe a bad thing could be unfolding in your office. It can. It happens. You have to just deal with it, realize this really is happening. And that second barrier, it's embarrassment. We're embarrassed to tell people we had to have a safety plan. Well, maybe they'll think I'm silly, or maybe I'm supposed to be tougher than this. Our job is not to be tougher. Our job is to do our job. And this stuff kind of impedes us doing it well for all the other customers who aren't acting badly. And the third is procrastination. Don't put this off. Tell your boss, tell your supervisor, write a written report, make sure it goes to the right people, make sure it's followed up on. So if you plan now, hope you never need that plan, but feel confident because you do have a plan, and the plan is what gets you home safely. So I want to thank you for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thanks, Dan. We have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to type into the audience chat box, and I can read them off. In the meantime, as we wait for some questions to come in, I have one.
Sure.
I'm wondered, what if I'm worried that my supervisor won't take my concerns seriously about a person who I think may become violent? What are your recommendations in that situation?
So, and that is a dicey and frequent issue in the workplace. You're even if you're not an OSHA state, and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania we are not. I'd like to think we all follow OSHA, which basically says you have to have an environment that's free from known hazards, and violence is a known hazard. So if your supervisor doesn't take that seriously, unfortunately, you may have to address that with the person above your supervisor.
Great, thank you. I have one more. I don't see any questions coming into the chat yet. So we'll do one more, and then if there's no other questions, we can, if you have anything else you'd like to say, we can go ahead with that. But my question is, what if I'm afraid of a coworker, but I don't want to have my name associated with a complaint about that person?
So there's actually quite a bit on that topic. So think of this. If you have an anonymous reporting line that goes to human resources, that's always your first and safest bet, where you follow your organization's policy and procedure. And that policy and procedure should say anybody can call our tip line and leave information about a concerning coworker. Usually that policy will also say if you make a complaint about a coworker and it's completely unfounded, there's going to be some issues with that report. But this allows, and where I came from in healthcare before I was here, when anyone called our tip line, we had a large team, and that team was headed by security and human resources. And then we had our psychologist, we had nursing, we had everything down to pharmacy. And we gave immediate attention to that. So what happens when you get to a situation, to further go on with that question, when someone says, well, we have absolutely no information other than your concern, and if we can circle back with that person, because let's say it's not anonymous, then we have to kind of put it to that person and say, look, it's not that we don't believe you, but we're going to kind of need more from you, because we can't proceed and try to make this a safer place if this is in fact a threat if you don't help us. So as a policeman and running the peer support program, I got a frequent similar question. That question would be, hey, I think my friend, another policeman, is going to take his own life, but please don't tell him I'm the one that told you. And that's a simple chat. Like, okay, let me ask you this. Do you think your friend told 10 cops or just you? And usually, well, just me. Like, do you think he's going to know that you're the one? Well, yes, I do. Would you rather your friend be alive, or would you rather your friend do something that he's not ever going to be able to regret because he won't be here anymore? And then we talk to people that way, and they go, oh, you know what? Never mind. I'd rather he be angry with me and alive than not angry with me and something else. So I don't know if that answered that adequately.
Definitely. Thank you. And we have a question from Jackie Gordon. She asked, do you have a structured program for onboarding new employees with this information?
So I'm not sure what we have here. We do have an onboarding process which talks about, from the Office of the Chief Clerk, our expectations, and they are given what we call the COMO. They are given an explanation of the policy. They are given an explanation of harassment. But when we get really granular in talking about workplace violence, I don't think it's that detailed at this point. But yes, they do get that. When I came from healthcare, they got chapter and verse on orientation. It was a 2-day process, and they got from my department, this is everything that we'd like you to know about workplace violence externally and internally. This is how you report it. This is how it is followed up on. And I think everyone should have a policy like that. Everyone should have a place for folks to go and express their concern, and then a process for that concern to be heard.
Great. Well, I have one more question, and then I think we can wrap up. This question is, what do I do if someone's behavior doesn't quite rise to the level of a crime, if it doesn't seem like it's necessarily serious enough to have, police involved?
Great question, and it's one that we've dealt with pretty much week in and week out, and including here. So we call those security concerns. We don't call that a security threat. We call it a concern. And I think it's very, very important that leadership in your organizations make it clear to folks that work for you that we will take your concern seriously. We don't want to create an environment in which people are afraid to report something. So when I was in healthcare early on, I had 5 separate employees in 5 different locations be the victim of significant sexual harassment by patients. And all of that was uncovered in a security audit, which we sent security staff out once a year to look at the physical structure, and then we always ask the staff, is there anything else that concerns you? And we uncovered not 1, but 5. And we realized this is a management issue. We took it to management, and they made it clear to their staff, you are not responsible for putting up with that kind of behavior from a patient or from anybody else. You need to report it immediately, and it will be dealt with swiftly. And I would recommend everybody have that kind of policy on board.
Great, thank you. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else as we wrap up?
No, I just appreciate everybody taking the time. I hope it was helpful, and even if there's 1 or 2 things you take back to your organization and go, hey, we want to look at this, I think it would be hopefully time well spent. And again, I want to thank the NCSL for allowing me to present.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'd like to put one plug in. There is a survey that will pop up at the end of this webinar. If you would mind filling it out for us, it's a lot of valuable information to help us design webinars going forward in the future. And with that, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.